community, our hometown. This is Kearney Live on 102.7 FM, our hometown radio station. Kearney Live is presented by Kearney Trust, 310 West 92 Highway in Kearney, 816-628-6666. And now here's the hosts of Kearney Live, Mike Davis and Jim Dickerson.
Thank you. Welcome to Kearney Live. I'm your host, Mike Davis, along with Jim Dickerson and producer-engineer Brian Watts, the smartest man in Kearney, Missouri. That's right. Yep, he's been upgraded from the busiest man, I think, the hardest working man, that's for sure. But
that brings up a good point. Would you rather be the hardest working man or the busiest man or the smartest man?
I'm going to guess that if you're the smartest man, you're not going to be working that hard.
Exactly, that's where I was going to go.
But Brian walks around a lot of times going, I am not a smart man.
No, that's your saying.
But I know what work is.
That is your saying, Jim.
Actually, that's Coach Gray, who, by the way,
that's right,
is going to be with us tomorrow for the Coach Gray Show. So be sure to join us
noon
tomorrow at noon for the Coach Gray Show, so we can talk about the upcoming game against who, Mike?
Ruskin, the Ruskin Eagles.
There you go. Very good.
Jim's alma mater. Jim, that's right. Studio audience. They must be Ruskin fans.
Well, there are three of them out there.
So they'll only let one of them in due to COVID restrictions.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
So we're still a limited and reduced audience.
Indeed,
because of that.
Jim. And I'm curious. I asked you the other day, and you didn't answer. Will you be wearing your Ruskin Eagles letter jacket from back in the day when you attended Ruskin High School?
I did answer that question, and I'm so happy to
Not
hear
for the entire audience
that you were listening, because it is on the show. And if you go back and listen, you will remember that I said I will not wear my letter jacket. However, I will wear a T-shirt that I wore that had Ruskin all over it when I was a senior. It looks like a halter top now, but I will be wearing it. So you've got that to look forward to.
Outstanding, and I will be looking forward to that. Listen, folks, today we have an amazing show, one that, frankly, I think all three of us have been looking forward to. We have Dorinda Nicholson with us today. Dorinda, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Hello. And thank you. In case people didn't know, we promoted this before this show throughout the week, and Dorinda is the author of Pearl Harbor Child. It is her personal account of witnessing the bombing of Pearl Harbor as a child, and the subtitle is A Child's Eyewitness View of Pearl Harbor from Attack to Peace. Now, what an incredible story to have, just for starters. For most of us, Pearl Harbor is something that we read about in the history books, and certainly that we have seen in the movies. And by the way, my wife has sent me a question to ask you about the movies, and we'll come back to that later. But what was happening, Dorinda, that first day, that first morning that this book is about? You were a child, and it was December 7th. What was happening that day?
It was a Sunday morning, and at 7:30, Mom in the kitchen. Church started at 9. So she was getting us breakfast, and I went into the kitchen, and along about 5 or 10 minutes later, we started hearing airplanes coming over. And my mom said what maybe thousands would have said when you count the men on the ships in the harbor. How unusual for a Sunday morning. We lived on a peninsula. We're not military. We're island folk. Mm-hmm. A peninsula that goes in, surrounded on 3 sides by the harbor. So around us is America's largest base, still is. And used to planes going over, but not on a Sunday morning. Mm-hmm. So there seemed to be more and more planes, and then our house started to shake, and my dad came into the kitchen. Same thing. Gosh, those maneuvers seem real, but it's Sunday morning. So he took off for the front door. I was right behind him, and my dad and I stood in our front yard, and now it's about 7:46, 56 on that morning. And the planes that we saw, I now know, I certainly didn't know as a 6-year-old, the planes that we saw were torpedo bombers, because the torpedo bombers have to come in at a low altitude, and they're on their final descent. And so you could see the torpedoes. But what I remember are the faces of the pilots, because they were just barely above our treetops and barely above our housetop.
Right.
And you got to think, going back then, the sound of those planes is different than what people are used to today. Because, today you hear a jet going over, and everybody's used to that. But these are prop planes, completely different sound.
Mitsubishi.
And then you put several of them together.
Like 300 of them.
Yeah. So, and for people who've never experienced that, it is a completely different sound. So when we go to air show stuff, and they have what they call them the warbirds now.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that sound. I love that sound.
But people who have, for instance, that live around here have never heard the sound of 100 warbirds together. And it's a totally different sound.
It actually makes me cry. I love sometimes even a private pilot's going over, and I just, there's not much of noise from that, but I love those warbirds.
No, I couldn't imagine hearing those like 100 feet off the ground.
No,
and a lot of them.
Actually, at our house, they're coming like pretty much one at a time. When they're taking off of the aircraft carriers, they come in waves. So there were 347 airplanes and pilots that could have taken off, came on 6 aircraft carriers. We never saw them. They snuck in. So the first wave takes off, and you have high-level bombers that do the deep bombing. And then what we could see in our yard were the torpedo bombers that are low, and then those were coming at one at a time. But the sound of the planes and then the guns, our roof was full of bullets. And I still carry a bullet that my dad dug out of our kitchen wall. I can't identify what it was, but the noise, and by this time there's explosions in the harbor.
I mean, you were 6 years old, and what I would think a 6-year-old would have been terrified by the sound, by the sight. Yeah,
I wasn't.
Talk to me about that.
I've now learned, of course, I'm going to tell you now how many aircraft there were, how many pilots, and of course, as a 6-year-old, I didn't know that, but I've now made it my mission that I want our schools and especially our students to know this history. And I feel an obligation because I'm one of the few, luckily, American children to ever go through a bombing.
Great
point. I did a book for National Geographic, and my assignment from them was, in fact, I begged for the assignment. I said, we hear the military stories, we need those stories. We hear the historians, we hear the researchers. Hardly ever do we hear the civilians, the women, and the children.
Right.
And there are more civilians, women, and children killed in war. And we have to have their stories. So I got the assignment. I loved it. And so I interviewed 16 children around the world. And of course, I'm the one in Hawaii. If I had been in London, a former flight attendant for TWA interviewed her. She slept in the underground every night. Her baby brother, was born during one of the attacks. in the underground. If you had been a German child, I interviewed a Hitler youth who told me he went off to war and he was 14. By the end of the war, he was 18, almost 19. Excuse me. And he was so wishing on the day that VE Day is happening in Europe that he could get rescued by an American, and he's going around trying to turn himself in and be rescued. And he didn't find any Americans, and the Russians took him, and so he went to Siberia to prison. The German young girl worked as a maid for the German officers, and that was her childhood. And then she was bombed twice a day. Americans one time at noon and at night.
Good heavens.
The British.
Right.
So what I learned from that, to answer your initial question, is I was, if there is such a thing as a perfect age for trauma, and maybe this is why I became a clinical social worker. And, well, I know why. One reason why. It was to support my habit of writing all these books, because they put a paycheck every other Friday in my account.
But you got to buy the groceries, don't you?
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
But what I learned then when I interviewed World War II child survivors, the age group from like 6 to about 12, if you have a caring person, so happened on a Sunday, Japanese wanted it that way. Let me get a drink of for just a second.
We're visiting today. We've got Dorinda Nicholson in studio with us today. She's the author of A Pearl Harbor Child, a child's eyewitness view of Pearl Harbor from attack to peace, and it's her personal account of witnessing the bombing that morning at Pearl Harbor as a child, as a 6-year-old, which is just fascinating.
So, 6 years old, the Japanese wanted to bomb on a Sunday because by watching, the spies watching down in the harbor, they could see that the ships would go out into the ocean. The Army and Navy, there's an island in the middle of the harbor called Ford Island. Runway, it's the same runway that Amelia Earhart landed on, and would practice, but they were all home by Sunday morning. So Sunday morning, Mom and Dad are home. Mom's not at work. Dad's not at work. My baby brother is sleeping in his crib.
Your family's all together.
Exactly. Right. So I'm 6 years old. The people that I love the most in the world were together. And Mom and Dad don't seem too worried. They're in their 20s, about that time. The one who ended up with the nightmares was my 2-year-old brother, who slept through it all.
Isn't that remarkable?
And then I found out again why when I'm doing this National Geographic book. Excuse me, everybody. No language. So you feel the tension. The American child I interviewed in the Philippines who got put in a Japanese prison camp was only 3, but she so remembers her mom screaming and the soldiers coming to take them away. But they were all together. So after 12, so my interviewees in Japan, oh my gosh, what we did, what my poor Japanese interviewee, when we bombed her and she lost her home. Those 12 years and older knew what was happening.
Right.
My Auschwitz interview knew what was happening. So I was in a good age, and such a long story to answer your question.
Well, you were somewhat protected by virtue of your age and the fact that your dad was near. In fact, as I recall, as I read earlier, you were clinging to your father at the time.
I was.
And so that sort of comforting feeling that as a child that your parents are the ones who protect you and care for you, and as a child you used to think they'll always be there for you.
And let me tell you when I got scared. After Dad and I run back in the house and we see the smoke from the harbor, of course he wants to get us away. So we get my baby brother, Mom and Dad, and baby brother and I are in the back seat, and we drive away from the harbor, and we start seeing trucks coming with military, some of them hanging on, barely pulling on pants and a T-shirt. And we head up for the hills into the sugarcane fields, and that's where we go to hide. And I'm still not scared, and now you can see high-level bombers. And then the third wave was canceled because our aircraft carriers weren't in the harbor and they were afraid. Thank goodness, though, because then the third wave was to take out all the oil tanks and the fires that would have created. Plus, then you have no fuel. And so how could we, get our ships and our airplanes going again? So that evening, it's starting to get dusk. By this time, President Roosevelt has come on the radio. We're listening to the car radio and telling us that, and then our local broadcaster is telling us that this is the real McCoy.
Right.
All of you, take shelter. You may not use the phone. And of course you want to see if your aunt and uncle and all are fine, but you couldn't. That was for military use and for emergencies.
Right.
You cannot leave your house. And so
the reality of war.
The reality
came into
is
focus.
war.
Sure.
And can't go home. And so the military police, and we're now under martial law, military police come in, and I beg to go home, left my dog, begged to go home, and none of us can go home. It's not safe. So they send us to Waipahu, which is a sugar cane processing plantation that is around on the other side of the island. And they take us in. So we're sitting there in the dark, and immediately Hawaii is on curfew, blackouts, all of that, not on the street. And the rumors start, and people start saying, I bet they're parachuting right now.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
And I bet when we wake up in the morning, we'll be surrounded. And the fear, I'm starting to scare myself, right?
Well,
that was, and then to compound it, every gun possible in Pearl Harbor is going, and we don't know what it is.
Right.
And we think the Japanese have come back.
That's Dorinda Nicholson. We're visiting with her today. She's the author of Pearl Harbor Child, a child's eyewitness view of Pearl Harbor from attack to peace. We're going to take a short break. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Making our programming possible on KPGZ are these fine underwriters.
Simplify your banking, simplify your life. It's easy with Kearney Trust Company. The world has become fast-paced, and we understand that you are busy. That's why we offer a banking experience that's as simple and stress-free as can be. Kearney Trust goes beyond convenient locations and good customer care to offer banking services that make managing your finances quicker and easier than ever before. Online, bill pay, e-statements, and mobile banking are available to give you a positive banking experience so you can get back to your life and activities. Kearney Trust also provides capital to people and businesses so they can achieve their goals. Whether you know exactly what you want or just need someone to talk to about your dream, you can speak with them and work on that dream. You may just be getting off the ground or ready to move into your brick and mortar building. Kearney Trust will provide you and your business with the resources you need to succeed. Kearney Trust Company is your partner for success with 2 convenient locations in Kearney at 310 West 92 Highway and 701 Watson Drive in Price Chopper. The phone is 816-628-6666. Kearney Trust Company. Banking you can trust. Member FDIC.
Welcome back to Kearney Live. We're talking to Dorinda Nicholson. Very interesting here. She's one of the survivors from Pearl Harbor during the attack. And the thing is, as we know, as we get older, we're losing a lot of the people who were actually there, who served in the military and who were there. So now we're to a point and we're left with survivors who were kids at the time. But the interesting thing here is, and Dorinda talked a little bit about it, the perspective of a military person as opposed to the perspective of a civilian is totally different. And a lot of it is, and I wanted to talk a little bit about this, a lot of it is your knowledge base. As a military person, you kind of know the background of what's going on. As a civilian, you don't. As a child, you know less. So from perspective, I had a couple of questions based on what you were talking about earlier. First of all, you talked about the bullets in your home. Would it be safe to assume that a lot of those were probably from our ships shooting at the planes? Or do you even know?
That I don't know. When we were sent to stay at the Waipahu sugar mill, we couldn't come back for several days. And that's so that the bomb squad, so to speak, could come in and remove what might still be live.
Oh, boy.
And when we got back, I was going to show you, but I even carry shrapnel that I picked up out of my yard. I used, and my mom and dad used an empty shell casing. Mm-hmm. For a doorstop. And you pick up, kids still do this today. You pick up bullets and you blow in them, to kind of make whistles. Those were everywhere. But yes. Okay. I certainly was in the area, and I think you're getting to friendly fire, mm-hmm. which, I always talk about when I'm in schools. In fact, I love the answer I got from one. I love 5th graders. They want to try on my gas mask. They wave and have so many awesome questions. So I say to them, do you know what friendly fire is? And one answer was, it's when you shoot at your friends who are not your enemies, and it's an accident you don't mean to, but it always happens. And that's the part. It always happens. So I left you sort of at a good breaking, clinging, turn the page point. So when we were sitting that night and, we're all scaring each other, and our water is going to be poisoned. And all of a sudden, the harbor lights up again, and so that everyone's saying, "See, the Japanese are back." What it was friendly fire. But I didn't find that out. I mean, I didn't know that night. I didn't find that out for almost 50 years. At the 50th anniversary, I was invited back to do speaking like I'm doing now. I got to meet, and it was from Lee Summit, Missouri, the only pilot to survive our friendly fire. I had mentioned luckily our aircraft carriers hadn't returned. So he was on the Enterprise. We thought, just like a 9/11 couldn't happen. And gosh, I thought so much about that earlier this week. And so December 7th couldn't happen, both of those. But they did happen. But we sent our aircraft carrier to go help in the Philippines because the Japanese did invade there. They hadn't quite gotten back. They get the radio message, Pearl Harbor under attack. So Admiral Halsey sends off his fighters. It's getting dark. He can't light up the deck and take a chance because we don't know where the Japanese, they had 6 aircraft carriers, 6. We had 1. So can't light up the deck. Request permission to land, sir. Request denied. Go to Pearl Harbor. So it's dark. And according to my Lee Summit pilot, tells me that the 6 of them are coming in. And we think they're the Japanese. Because he says everyone who had a gun, civilians, right, military, they're ready.
So, and there's a lot of things that it's perspective. So a lot of people may not realize you've got to put yourself back in 1941. So there's a couple of things. Number one, we have radar now, which is, you have it on your phone. I mean, I can look on my phone and tell you where different airplanes are. Back in 1941, we had radar, but it was horrible at best. We were just learning about it.
Right.
The other thing is, so if you've ever flown out over the ocean and it's dark, you can't see anything. So back then, when they talk about a blackout, if they black out Hawaii,
yes,
you can't find Hawaii because
that's what we hoped.
Yeah, because the Japanese don't have. So now we have, when we fly now, we have beacons and we have GPS, we have all this stuff. We can hit a spot within a foot. In 1941, you couldn't do that. So the other thing is when you're talking about planes flying over and guys parachuting in, which you didn't know if was happening or not. In today's environment, obviously we'd know that because we could see the planes, we could see all that. Back then you couldn't. So the final question I had, and this is a poll for you, I'll let everybody take part in the poll. In 1941, if they said, stay off your telephone, we have to use it for emergencies, and so the military can communicate, because back then, I mean, if you think about it, it was the people plugging in and manually. You didn't have cell phones, obviously.
We were number 7 on our party line. 1 long, 2 short.
Yeah, so exactly. If that happened today, they said, don't use your cell phone, we need it for emergencies only, how many people, that's exactly what would be happening. Everybody would go, well, that doesn't apply to me. And they, because you got to update your Twitter and your Facebook.
Good heavens, yes.
So I think perspective, though, is huge of what was going on there. And the way you kind of bring it to light, when you talk about, and then there's also, people who were not involved in Pearl Harbor, which Mike and I clearly weren't. Well, Mike may have been. You were like 30 at the time.
Oh, sorry.
But you lose your perspective. But when you look at 9/11, it's exactly what you said. Number one, we thought that could never happen. Number two, it's very easy to look back now because we know what happened. Same thing with Pearl Harbor. If you've read history at all and you know what Halsey did and you know all the moves we did with Midway and all that, and we put carriers out and we risked this, but we know how it turned out. when it happens to you and you have no idea what's going on, the things that go through your head, it's just like 9/11. When they hit the towers, we didn't know what was next. Everybody was in a panic for a month.
Yeah, we thought it was pilot error from the first one. Yeah.
And so, but, in 1941, it's even worse because you don't know. You guys, from a history standpoint, how much did you know about what was building up as civilians?
Nothing. But again, my 6-year-old self, of course, knew nothing, just play in the water and so forth. And there's so, I guess it's like the Civil War. There's still books coming out on it. There's yet several books on Pearl Harbor. From what I've read was, we were cautious of the Japanese who live in Hawaii. People don't realize that culturally there are more Japanese in Hawaii than any other race. And we've been watching Japan, but we thought, how in the world could they come 4,000 miles? It's not like the B-2 bomber that's at Whiteman down the road from us. So we felt really safe. And the harbor it's a huge harbor with a narrow channel.
Right.
We just lock it up like livestock. So you lock it up on a Saturday night and you're safe. So it was like the 9/11. It couldn't happen. But the preparation that we did do that worked against us. What about the Japanese who now live here? They might be spying. So let's take our airplanes and take them out of the hangars and let's push them up against the runway. And then let's put them wingtip to wingtip.
Right.
And we can watch them better. Oh, we better take the guns off and lock them up. Same thing on the battleships. The guns were all locked up. And so you have to get the guns. So it's probably about the second wave that we're ready to start shooting back. And so to kind of go back again, probably not that much friendly fire bullets. And what I carry, I'm not sure if they're Japanese or American. But on the radar was brand new. So we had our radar station set up on the North Shore. There were 2 radio operators on duty, and it's called the Opana Radio Operator Station. And so they're there, and on their screen is a huge number of flying aircraft. They don't know what it is. So they do their battery phone and they call Fort Shafter. The sergeant that answers at Fort Shafter says, "Don't pay attention. We have some B-17s that are flying in from California. They're going to stop here to refuel, not to help us in Hawaii, but then to go on to the Philippines." Ignore them.
Good heavens, wow.
And that was our warning. And kind of a funny story to me is because I speak so often at Pearl Harbor and at their conferences, one of the sons of the radar operator was talking about his father's story, and then the son from Fort Shafter, whose father said, "Don't worry about it, they're American planes," got into arguing about what their fathers should have done.
Goodness. It's such an interesting, first of all, I want to let everybody know we are visiting today with Dorinda Nicholson, and she's the author of A Pearl Harbor Child, and that is a child's eyewitness view of Pearl Harbor from attack to peace. And one of the things that I've noticed in this news release is that there are comments in here by people who've read your book and books, but specifically this one that we're talking about today, and many of them are school teachers. One of the things, and this is a testimonial here, it says, her books exemplify the best in nonfiction writing, a compelling story in tandem with an inspiring message combined to create a tale that opens both heart and mind. They touch you as few books can. A must for every classroom. Now, one of the things that I think is relevant today is that we see there are anarchists right now in our nation who are tearing down statues and effectively hoping to destroy whatever history is in our country. And for whatever reason, I don't know. I can't get into the mind of these people. But how important, in your words, in your mind, how important is it that your book and this story continues to be told throughout classrooms across America?
Well, of course, it's important to me, and I wish I could find that teacher. And because I've written a news story, and I can't get an agent, and I can't get it sold, and I'm wallpapering, with all my reject letters. One of the wonderful things that happened when Pearl Harbor Child first came out were the veterans started coming to me, and I felt like I was 6 years old again, and giving me their stories. And so one of them was an American Marine by the name of Richard Fisk. He joined at 17, so he's now 19. And what happened to him that morning, he's the bugler, and the job on his battleship, the West Virginia, is to be up on the bridge, blow reveille, because that's how the men hear to get up. It's da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So he's up there, and it's, that same time. In fact, if you go to a Pearl Harbor program, and I hope all of you will and get to at some point, they all start like at 7:46 in the morning. So he's up there because the flag goes up at 8 o'clock. The Japanese, again, airplane comes in. We don't believe it. He's angry. He's going to get the tail number and have him court-martialed. And then torpedoes come. He sees the Japanese pilot because the pilot's up high and Richard is up high. You can hear my voice getting more and more excited. And his ship sinks. And so he goes through hatred, nightmares. Eventually, he and a Japanese pilot become friends. I love that story, but it wouldn't have been written if I hadn't told my kid's story, because the pilot, to survive our friendly fire the night of December 7th, again, bringing me the gift of their stories. So when I go, and Monday night, I forgot to tell them all to listen today. Anyway, what I said to them, the message I wanted to leave with them, the message I wanted to leave with schools is you all have a story. Republic Airlines, how you got named Watts. There's all these wonderful stories that need to be passed on. This one, it's the way our history goes. We hated the Japanese, and we made fun of them all during the war. We put 130,000 American citizens. They went with one suitcase, and I tell, again, I tell them, the kids in class, what if you would go to prison because you had blue eyes and brown hair? And that's the only reason. Well, and I said, and you leave. Do you think your TV would still be in your bedroom 3 years later? Do you think your car would be in your driveway 3 years later? What about the farm that supported you? So we hated the Japanese, and now we're best friends.
Right. These
crazy.
Are, yes, terribly powerful lessons. The stories of war and the history is so important. We're visiting today with Dorinda Nicholson. She's in studio with us. She's the author of Pearl Harbor Child. She's going to still be here when you come back, so come back. We're going to take a short break. Stay with us.
A special thank you going out to underwriters like these for their support of KPGZ.
Simplify your banking, simplify your life. It's easy with Kearney Trust Company. The world has become fast-paced, and we understand that you are busy. That's why we offer a banking experience that's as simple and stress-free as can be. Kearney Trust goes beyond convenient locations and good customer care to offer banking services that make managing your finances quicker and easier than ever before. Online, bill pay, e-statements, and mobile banking are available to give you a positive banking experience so you can get back to your life and activities. Kearney Trust also provides capital to people and businesses so they can achieve their goals. Whether you know exactly what you want or just need someone to talk to about your dream, you can speak with them and work on that dream. You may just be getting off the ground or ready to move into your brick and mortar building. Kearney Trust will provide you and your business with the resources you need to succeed. Kearney Trust Company is your partner for success with 2 convenient locations in Kearney at 310 West 92 Highway and 701 Watson Drive in Price Chopper. The phone is 816-628-6666. Kearney Trust Company. Banking you can trust. Member FDIC.
And welcome back to Kearney Live. We're talking to Dorinda Nicholson, who is a Pearl Harbor survivor. She was actually there when the attack took place, and sadly one of the few that's left. We're talking about her book, which we have here. You can actually pick it up on Amazon, or she has a website, which Brian is going to put up. There it is right there. You can go to the website and order the book as well. It's a fascinating book. It's got a bunch of information in it. A lot of it that I think is very interesting. You know, a lot of people, although there's some truth to it, they like to pick their history up off of a movie. So if you saw Pearl Harbor, the movie, now I will say this. For you know, I've read a lot about Pearl Harbor and all the things with World War II. There are some things in the movie Pearl Harbor that are kind of accurate. That are some that are made for cinematography. If you watch the movie Midway, I have not seen the new movie. I saw the old. Did you see the new one?
Brian just gave it a thumbs up.
He said it too.
Yeah, it's great.
Okay, so you saw it too? Okay. I have not seen the new one.
I have to tell you, Jim, you're leading up to a question that I was assigned to ask by my wife.
Then I won't ask that question yet. But
Jeannie Davis wants to know, as others.
Hold on.
All right, but you're leading up. I just want to make sure that we.
What I was going to say is,
listen, I don't want to get in trouble at home. You know what I mean?
I know. Believe me, I know.
We have World War II going on right here.
What is your problem? No. So, I think it's important for people to, though, learn the history, not from a movie. A movie is always going to have, no matter what it is, go watch JFK. There are parts of that movie that are factual and true. There are parts that are done, because let's face it, the movie has to be entertaining or nobody will watch it. So that whole love story thing going on in Pearl Harbor, how touching. Not sure how true it is, but it's touching. It's gripping. But I will say this. When I was in high school and college, history, I hated it. I had no interest in it. I would rather go sit in the bathroom or something. I will say, though, that they have documentary stuff on the Discovery Channel, the History Channel. PBS has them. Some of these documentary stories, you can learn more in 3 hours than I learned in 5 years of school. Now, for those of you who want to criticize, it wasn't 5 years of high school, so don't get excited, or 5 years of college. However, apparently Mike Davis has a question.
Well, thanks for the setup, Jim. I thought we'd never get to the question, but my wife...
Did I derail again?
Jeannie Davis would love to know, since we're talking about the movies and Jim has effectively shot them down. See what I did there? Yeah, that's right. Of all of the Pearl Harbor movies, Jeannie and others perhaps would like to know which would be, in your estimation, the ones you've seen are the best historical depiction of the attack.
Oh, certainly Tora. And you can still see it in both Japan and both the U.S. In fact, they worked together on the movie. The Pearl Harbor one, do you know it's almost 20 years old? It came out at the 60th anniversary. And in 2021, that will be our 80th anniversary. I like Josh Hartnett much better. And I think the beautiful nurse should have chosen, but she ended up with him.
See, Jim, people do like the love story.
Well, but they did, they used a lot of the World War II warbird people. And
right.
Actually, one of them crashed during the filming of the movie. But that wasn't supposed to happen. They did a good job on everything else, and I tolerated the love story.
I don't care. Well, it's funny because we were talking about what this has to do with but I had to go this morning and do my FAA medical again, like we have to do so often. And every time I do the eye test, I think of the Pearl Harbor movie, and I'm like, this is not the way. That's not how it works. Just so you know, they have all sorts of weird stuff. But anyway, I digress. But Tora, and Midway.
I liked Midway.
The funny thing was, this is how I derail a show. I am an expert, and Brian's nodding yes.
Yeah.
They used, because they didn't have the budgets that they have now, they used a ton of the same footage on both movies. So you'll see the same thing. You're like, wait, didn't that plane do that in Midway? And if you look real close, when the Japanese planes are taken off the ship, you can see where the camera pans around and actually catches other cameramen. You can see the people. So there's a couple of movie flaws in there, but
that makes it just more heartwarming.
Indeed, it does. And we have there is some really interesting history about you that I'd like to get to here. Dorinda Nicholson, Dorinda Makanaonalani.
Got it.
It took me 2 tries that time. Is the Pearl Harbor child, and you were born in Hawaii to a Hawaiian mother who taught you hula. Now, that education and learning how to do the dance got you exposed in all places all over the world, including, it's the reason you ended up in Kansas City. Now, and I also read that you taught your dog how to dance the hula. I'm kind of a visual guy, and I'm sorry. I'm picturing this little dog doing the hula, and how smart of a dog was that, or how smart of an instructor were you?
Can you go back to that for a minute, Brian? There. Okay, so this is Mike right there, and there's his dog.
Now,
well, she was a natural, and we had the classes in our front living room, linoleum, floor, 40s.
Who doesn't love linoleum?
Yes. It's so easy to sweep and slide your feet on to dance.
Or slide your dog across.
Slide the dog across. So she just came and joined our class, and, she could put her back end in motion and with no penalties. And
that is hilarious. Now, and you ended up, what did I see that it was when you were 18, you won the KMO-TV Flight to Fame contest for a hula performance, which took you to the mainland for the first time. And there you went on a visit to see your father's family here in Kansas City, in Missouri. And
exactly.
Right. Yeah. And you ultimately attended college here in Kansas City, and became an airline stewardess, is what they called them at the time, right?
No, we were hostesses.
Hostesses, wow. That was even before stewardess.
Oh, and let me tell you, you wore hose.
So does Jim.
Well, we even had a girdle check when we would check in.
My.
Our hair.
Well, you had to do height and weight too, right?
Height it. Oh, I got weighed every time I checked in. And one time, excuse me again, one time I got furloughed until I lost 5 pounds.
I'm telling you,
I'd never be hired.
Well, I wouldn't either now. But, and I'm not a flight attendant. Just want to throw that out there. But the requirements then are compared to what you couldn't even do that now. I mean,
that's true. Well, and for me to have to resign because I was getting married, a lot of my friends just got married secret.
Yeah.
A lot of my friends just kept it quiet that they were married. So
so they could keep working.
Exactly.
Wow.
I didn't want to quit. I ended up staying with the airlines, and I went to work for United in their city ticket office. But I wouldn't have been able to fly for United either.
Now, you said you first applied at TWA.
I did. I was too young.
Yeah. And then, but
Braniff, you only had to be 19.
There you go. Yeah.
And I got married at 20. So.
And so you look at a flight attendant now, and you look at what you had to wear back then. I mean, you had the hat, you had the whole nine, and the shoes.
Don't forget the girdle.
Well, I wouldn't know about that.
Yes, we had girdle checks.
I find them to be horribly uncomfortable.
They are, but we had to wear
girdle check.
We had to wear heels.
That's the part that.
And the only time you could take your heels off to put on your flats to do the meal service is once the wheels left the ground. Then you slip into your flats, so you can walk up and down the aisle easier.
Yeah. So you bring up another thing that I highly recommend. If you have the ability, obviously go to Hawaii, but go to Pearl Harbor. And it's not just to get on the boat to go. So, full disclosure, if you get on the boat, see if you agree with me here. Have you been out there, Pearl Harbor?
I'm not.
If you get on the boat to go over to the
Arizona,
the view you get on the Pearl Harbor or on the Arizona Memorial thing is not what you're going to see in the books and everything else, because you're not high enough to see the full outline of the boat. You really don't see that. So if you go out there for that perspective, you're just not going to see it. However, I still highly recommend you go out there to be at the location where that is. You cannot duplicate it in pictures or anything else. You have to be there.
I've heard this.
Then go get on the Missouri, or if you get a chance, if you can't go to Hawaii, go over to Charleston. Yeah, I don't know if I can show that, but let me see can you see that? That outline of the boat right there, you just can't see it because you're at sea level when you're on the tour. If you can't go there, go out to I know Charleston has them, San Diego has them. Get on these boats that are retired now. The Missouri, the Yorktown, all the ones that you can get on wherever they are, and get a feel for what these guys had to go through on these ships. They are not luxury by any stretch. And when you take how many people they have on a ship at a given time, and then you're deployed for 6 months to a year on these ships, then once you feel like you're all of that in a bag of chips, get on a submarine.
Yes.
No thanks. No thank you.
It is the most, and you sit there and think.
I can't imagine.
I can't imagine being on it for 2 hours, much less.
Nope.
And there's a submarine at Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, there is one there. There's one in Charleston. There might be one in San Diego. I can't remember. But I highly recommend that you go out
great advice,
and get
Jim.
the perspective
Yep,
of that.
Great advice. Folks, listen, pick up this book. Dorinda Nicholson, she's the author of Pearl Harbor Child. Just get on the internet today, buy a copy of this book. It's fascinating. If you're a school teacher, work this into your lesson plan. And Dorinda, you said from about 5th grade on, or probably is about the level of the book, you think?
3rd graders could do. I have a color book version of my story.
Okay.
When they go on the website, certainly. Oh, before we leave, American Girl doll has done a Pearl Harbor doll, and this is their newest history doll, and it's the only
hold that up
person that
there you go
that is alive.
Wow. Okay. Outstanding. Well, again, thank you so much for being with us, Dorinda Nicholson, author of Pearl Harbor Child. Thanks, everybody, so much for joining us today. It's been an interesting show. I wish we had more time, but we don't. Thanks so much to everybody who's been listening. Thanks for those of you who are watching on Facebook Live. And thank you so much to Kearney Trust for sponsoring this program and so many other shows just exactly like it. We'll see you next week on Kearney Live. Thanks for being with us.